The difference, my friend, between a customer having an excellent experience with our services versus a not so good or a terrible experience sometimes can be a very fine line. And in this nugget, you and I get to look at the details that have a significant impact on whether or not we can get and keep happy customers. Let's begin. I'd like you to imagine or visualize with me going to some kind of a professional. Maybe it's going to get your teeth worked on, or your hair cut, or you're going to a doctor, or perhaps you're going to have your car repaired. And then before you leave the house to go, you realize, I think they've moved recently, and so you do a quick Google search to find out their current address. And as a result of that Google search, I'd like you to imagine that you see a Yelp review that has like 3 out of 5 stars. And so, being curious as we are, we look at the details of that, and we notice that there's some people that really love the service from this vendor, from this professional, but yet at the same time, there's other people that hate the service, that had a terrible experience. Why is that? Does it mean that the vendor had a really bad product, or were the expectations or the pricing not appropriate for what the customer expected to receive? Or did the provider simply not deliver what they promised? Any or all of those factors could contribute to a customer having a poor customer service experience. And in the world of ITIL, let's go ahead and clarify the word service. What exactly is that? And let's also talk about why it's important for you and I to clarify the word or the meaning of service. And one of the benefits will be if we have multiple people like you and I and all the other people who are studying this ITIL framework, if we all have a really clear idea on what service is, and we're using the same terminology, it's going to help us in communicating better. It'll also help us be aware of our service, including any faults that we might have to make it even better. So here, my friend, is a great definition of service that's handed to us as a gift from ITIL. And the definition of a service is a means of delivering value to customers by facilitating outcomes or results that customers want to achieve. And a big part of that is not only do they get the outcomes they wanted, but they didn't have to make the infrastructure investment to make it happen. For example, I had dinner on Friday night with a friend from California who works for Salesforce, and he loves it. And Salesforce offers a customer relation management service that is cloud-based. So they're offering software as a service. So a business can become a customer of Salesforce. They can simply log on and start using that service, and they didn't have to do any of the internal pain and suffering to create that service. For example, behind the scenes, what did Salesforce had to do? Well, they had to have a plan, so they had to have a strategy of what they would be delivering. They had to design it. They had to create it. Sometimes in the world of ITIL, we refer to the creation as transition, meaning we're transitioning from a design to actually implementing the solution. Then there's operations, which we can think of as the care and feeding of these services as they're being delivered and up and running. And as things come up or new features want to be introduced, there's improvement. And the reason improvement is important, especially in a competitive environment, is that we want to make sure our customers, our businesses that we're serving, stay devoted to us because they're paying for those services. And from a business perspective, they want to keep those customers. So going back to our definition of service, where Salesforce is providing value to customers by facilitating outcomes or results and applications that can facilitate that can now be done by this customer. And the customer did not have to have all the pain and suffering of designing the system, hosting the servers, creating the software, maintaining and operating the software, because that's all done by the provider of the service. In this example, it's Salesforce. And as you might imagine, there's lots of different types of IT service providers. And as far as provider goes of IT services, it could be anything from network connectivity to software as a service or infrastructure as a service, or any IT service that's being delivered that's providing value to that customer without that customer having to bear all the responsibility of the servers and the software and the cost involved if they had to implement it all on their own. Now, part of the definition of service is that we're bringing value to the customer or to the business. So the next question that we should probably chat about together is that if an IT service provider is providing this service, this value to the customer, to the business, and that customer could be an internal customer with an IT department, for example, inside of an organization, or the customer could be a business that's external, which would make it an external customer. And the challenge is that if the customer, the business, doesn't see value, meaning they don't believe that the services they're getting are worth at least as much or more than what they're paying for those services, they're not going to be a customer for very long. So something that's going to be really helpful for you and I as we take a look at providing quote unquote value to the customer is to understand how value is quantified or what makes up value. And one way of getting a grip on how valuable is a service to the customer is just for a moment putting ourselves in the customer's shoes or in the customer position and looking at it from their perspective. And when we talk about the customer's position or the customer's point of view, we're really referring to the business, the entity that's paying for our service. And from that business or customer perspective, there's two primary elements that are going to weigh in heavily regarding whether or not that customer sees our service as a value. And those include, what does the service do? And the other element is, can it be used? And let me put a line down the middle there. And let's start off with, what does the service do? Let's imagine an IT service provider is providing the service of virtualized servers. So you can spin up virtualized servers up in the cloud, infrastructure as a service. So you can spin up 5 or 10 or 100 VMs, and then the customer/business can use them as they want to. And if that's what the customer needs and wants, it meets their business objectives, we're on track. Because the value to the customer that wants or needs that service can then purchase those services like a utility, like paying the water bill or paying the electric bill or paying the service provider bill for usage for these virtual machines. And it can bring value to them because they don't have to host and pay for the cost of all the individual servers and infrastructure and everything else that allowed those servers to be there in the first place. They're simply purchasing the services without having to have the infrastructure, and that's where the value comes in. Now, the other side of the equation over here is, can it be used? What if the service provider has an outage or they're oversubscribed and it's not able to perform? Well, that's going to significantly put a damper on how useful that service is if the customer can actually use it. So in ITIL, we have a couple of names that we associate with what does the service do and can it be used as they relate to value. And for what does the service do, that's called utility. And regarding can it be used, that is called warranty. Another way to describe these values is, are they fit? For example, is this service fit for the purpose that the customer or the business wants to use it for? So we can call that fit for purpose. And regarding the warranty, or can it be used, is it available? For example, does it have enough capacity? Is the uptime going to be enough? Is it secure enough? We can refer to that as fit for use. I remember many years ago, I had a mentor who told me that repetition is the mother of learning. So what I would encourage you to do right now, or at least when you can get to a pen and paper, is to pause and then write out these two primary factors that go into the equation of whether or not the customer is perceiving value. Does it have utility that the customer needs? And does it work? Is it available? Is it up? And can they use it? And in the case of a service being offered to a customer, if it has both utility and warranty, does that mean it's perfect for the customer and they love it? Do they perceive value? And the answer is no. It doesn't guarantee that, because at the end of the day, value is in the eye of the beholder. So if the customer is paying, for example, $100,000 a year for some service, whether it's virtualization or accounting services, or high-speed internet, or email, or cloud security, if the business's expectations have not been met, or if they perceive that the cost is too high for the services they've received, that could also equate to the customer not perceiving value. So the reason this is helpful for you and I is because if we're aware of what creates value and we have proper customer relations where we've identified what the customer needs, we've set the expectations, and we've communicated with them well, our goal is that the customer will perceive the value and will continue to buy or purchase our services because they are perceiving the value. And that's an important factor, isn't it, in gaining and keeping customers for any IT service that's being delivered. So let's imagine that you and I are in charge of an IT service company, an IT service provider, which means we're providing IT services to one or more internal or external customers. And as part of our company to provide these services, we've got people, we've got processes in place, and a process is simply a name for a collection of activities. So for example, to get from A to Z, if we have a process for getting there, that process could have activity 1, and then activity 2, and activity 3, etc. And we could refer to these collections of activities as processes. So we've spent some time as the IT service provider in strategizing, working with the customer, designing solutions, creating solutions. And we've also spent appropriate time in following up and monitoring to make sure that we're actually delivering what the customer expects. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're meeting that business expectation from our customer and that they have perceived value from our services so we can be in business long term. And one way of creating those happy customers where their expectations are met and they're perceiving value from our services is to master the technique of service management. And as it relates to IT, it would be IT service management, or ITSM for short, IT service management. And service management is a set of special organizational capabilities. For example, we have the processes and the activities and the people and the technology in place that allows us, you and I, as a service provider, to provide value to the customer in the form of services. And if we've correctly done service management, where we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed and we're doing everything correctly, our service management will allow us to do the implementation and the management of quality IT services that meet the needs of the customer. And when that happens, it's a win-win because we stay in business. We're providing value to that customer, to that business from the IT services that are being delivered. And because that customer perceives that value, they continue being our customer. So if we remember back to our story about the poor Yelp review, the provider of those services could have provided exceptional service and avoided the negative reviews if they had proper service management. And in the world of ITIL, the ITIL framework can assist us in providing IT services that our customers will value. In this nugget, we've identified that service is a means of delivering value to customers by facilitating outcomes or results that the customers want to achieve without our customer having to own all the individual components, which of course is one of the benefits to the customer. They don't have to own the infrastructure, they can just pay for the service they use. We also identified the components that go into perceived value, which include utility and warranty, as well as the customer's perception of the services being worth at least as much as what they're paying for those services. Hopefully, they'll see the value in the services we provide as being more valuable than what they actually have to pay for those services. And regarding the customer or the business that's the consumer of our IT services, it could be internal customers, for example, different business units within our own company that are receiving those services, or the customer or business could be an external customer. And that service management is a set of special organizational capabilities or skills for providing that value to customers in the form of services. And that IT service management, ITSM, is the implementation and management of quality IT services, again, that meet the demands of the business. Hey, I'm glad that you joined me in this nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.